Hey everyone, excited you're with us. Thank you all for joining Kristin, Tina, and I today. We have some great content lined up for you. Before we get started with the content, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Austin Westerfeld. I'm going to be helping out with the Q&A during this presentation, so feel free to interact with us. We encourage you to ask any questions that you might have along the way. All right, so a few things about Innovatemap before I hand things over to the experts, Tina and Kristin. Innovatemap is an agency based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Specifically, we are a digital product agency. So we're focused on product management and strategy, user experience design, product brand, and product marketing. Our team of product professionals partners with clients to amplify what's working and to fix what's not. So we help companies of all sizes, both SaaS and non-SaaS. We can start from the strategy level by immersing ourselves in your business to help you map out a plan for success. From there, we can help take that idea from being just an idea all the way to launch, ensuring you're building the right solution for the right problem and the right user. And then we can take that plan and create beautiful, effective, and user-friendly experiences. All of those efforts are very much so focused on resonating with the user. Conversely, we also partner with clients to focus on resonating with the buyer. So that starts with the branding and visual identity, making sure that you're creating lasting brand impressions on your audience. And then from there, we can help you articulate that value both internally and externally through great product marketing. Some of those elements of product marketing we'll touch on today. And while a good product is one that's well architected and stable, those are table stakes. We believe at Innovatemap that a better product is one that's marketable, it's easy to buy and sell, valuable, it solves problems, and usable. It's intuitive and a well-designed experience. So with that, I'm going to introduce today's presenters, Tina Hafer and Kristin Hess. First, Tina is a founding partner of the Innovatemap team. She brings over 25 years of technology and enterprise software sales in both technical sales and product marketing. She partners with clients to help them see the bigger picture, to identify their challenges and create a plan to overcome those challenges. She plays a strategic role in defining all things product marketing for the firm, from product hierarchy to positioning and messaging to packaging, and then all the way to sales enablement and those activities. Along with Tina, we have Kristin Hess. So Kristin is a principal with Innovatemap, bringing years of experience as a seasoned marketer across multiple industries. Her passion is around creating the right strategy to stand out and market. She's helped a wide range of companies from startups to large corporations tackle their goals through product marketing, positioning, and brand strategy. And with that, I'll hand things over to the experts. If you have any questions, again, I'll be in the Q&A section, so please ask away. Thanks.
Thanks, Austin. I appreciate that introduction. All right, well, we are excited to spend a few minutes with you this afternoon, and our goal today is to talk about product hierarchy, to put some definition to what we mean at Innovatemap by product hierarchy, and help you understand why we think it's such an important foundational element to your product marketing efforts, and how to improve your own, a few steps and a few thought starters to get you going down that path. We're going to cover several different things today. We're first going to talk about pain points, when you should take a look at your product hierarchy. We'll define what it is, so that helps. And then we'll talk about the impact that it has and that we believe it can have on both your internal audiences and your external audiences. And then we'll finally talk about putting it into practice. What are some key things that you can start thinking about as you take this back to your world? So with that, we'll jump right into pain points. So how do you know when you need to take a look at your product hierarchy? Well, a couple different situations. One, if you're a startup, you likely have few key product features, and from 4 to 10 to 20, and they're probably fairly manageable. So I still encourage those that are in a startup mode to still take this effort on seriously and to start to build a foundation. So as you start to scale both your product and your organization, you won't be backed into a corner with a clunky or an unorganized product hierarchy. Typically, this comes into play with scale-up organizations. So as you have scaled your organization, as you have scaled your product over time, you may have recognized that you have built a Frankenstein. As you start to piece together different Lego blocks into your product hierarchy, how does they all fit together? Is it logical? Is it more organic, or maybe even unnatural as you built it out over time? So when it's starting to look like a Frankenstein, talk like a Frankenstein, walk like one, then that may be time for you to take a step back and take a look at your product hierarchy. Are there opportunities where you could be more clear or simplify how you're talking about your product? So if you end up talking in TLAs or 3-letter acronyms all the time to describe different very technical features in a lot of cases, there may be an opportunity for you to raise it up a bit and to talk about your products in a different way. So making sure that you are clear and simple as you are describing it to the market, as you are using this in all of your different product marketing efforts and your sales efforts, etc. Onboarding, this is an interesting one. I have always been pleasantly surprised when I've worked with clients that have said, boy, I wish I would have had this clear understanding the day that I started. It helped me get up to speed very quickly. It helped me understand exactly what it is, what we do, what the product is, what the features are, how things are organized. So it can have an impact on your onboarding efforts as well. Upselling, how strong is your anchor? If you have a broad set of products or modules or features, how do your customers know where they're anchored in that product? The other important thing is, how do they know when they're, or how do you know, or your sales folks know when there's opportunity to upsell them to other areas? So let's say that they're only using 10% of the product value. How do they know that they have a whole range of other value benefits that they can take advantage of in the other 90% of the product that they're not using? So if you're able to anchor them into an area of the product that they're using today, that gives you a clear path for upselling opportunities in the future. So making sure you have that clear roadmap for where you're going, even in sales. Sales, is it complicated to explain what your product does? So does your sales team, they may not be technical sales folks, they may not have the depth in the particular industry, but it should be easy for them to be able to pick up and talk about. They don't have to know all the features. They don't have to know all about the API or the integrations or the user configuration or system administration. We don't need to go to that level of depth, but it should be easy for them to understand and, again, help the prospects and customers anchor themselves in where they are and the value that they're getting out of the product. Marketing. I personally love clear marketing, and I love breadcrumb trails. I like to be able to connect the dots across products as we're diving into different areas within a product. So if you feel like your marketing materials are becoming a bit unwieldy, not really sure what product we're talking about on this one-sheeter versus the next one-sheeter, are we using the same language across these one-sheeters to help your buyers and the recipients of this material connect those dots across the product? That may be another indicator that you want to take a step back. And finally, product. As you start, as I mentioned earlier, clicking these Lego blocks together to figure out how things are going to move forward in your product and how you're going to continue to grow and scale that product, is the next area of opportunity clear to you? Do you know where you're going to add innovative new features or potentially even a brand new product into your portfolio of offerings? Being able to understand what you have today is going to help you determine where those holes are that you might want to fill, or where you want to expand on various opportunities in the product itself. So if any of these things resonate with you, it may be an opportunity for you to take a step back and to take a look at how your product hierarchy is organized. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we mean by product hierarchy, what it is to you, and the impact that it can have. So when I say product hierarchy, you probably, especially if you're in a scale-up type of an organization, you probably already have this today. You just may not have called it that. It may be a framework or some sort of a structure, or even just a Word document that has definitions of your different modules or features. What does this feature do? What does that feature do? You may have it, but in a lot of cases, we talk about this is your opportunity to clean the garage out. So over time, that garage gets messy, things get labeled wrong, things get shoved into boxes that you don't know where you're or how you're ever going to find those things again. A product hierarchy is a very clean garage. It's a very well organized and logical structure of all of your offerings. And I say offerings because this can not only apply to your digital product, but also your services offerings. So don't let that hinder you, or don't let that stop you from taking a look at what are all the things that you're offering, and how do all of these pieces and parts fit together, both in digital product and any services that you might be offering. Product hierarchy is very foundational in my eyes. I believe that it truly does make it really easy and efficient for everybody, inside and out, to understand your unique offerings and where the lines are drawn. It becomes more or less that filter by which you're making decisions about the product. So if you do have a new roadmap idea, does it fit? That's fine if it doesn't. You want to be able to make sure that you have the right foundation and that it's flexible and scalable enough for you to grow into it over time. Also, very importantly, it establishes a shared language across your organization and with your clients. We'll talk about, you may have been calling it product or feature XYZ in the past. In the future, you're going to call it ABC. I don't care what you call it. I just want you to have a common language and shared terminology across the organization. That's so important. If you're talking about features or products or modules or platforms, whatever it might be, establishing that common terminology and that shared language is going to take you miles. It does, I believe, set the foundation upon which you can build your positioning, your messaging, a lot of your branding, and your long-term vision. Now, when we talk about, we're going to talk here in a few minutes about the different types of hierarchies or frameworks and how they all relate to each other. I'd point that out, especially as we're talking about branding here. But I do believe that it sets the right foundation upon which you can build, as long as it's scalable and flexible, so you can, again, grow into it. And finally, it truly is well organized, flexible, or scalable, and it's operationalized. That's always an area that folks seem to not think about right out of the gate. And when I talk about operationalized, I mean everybody within the organization knows what it is, says that and describes it the same way, and knows what to do with it. For instance, contracts. How does this affect contracts that you have with your customers? What does the bill of materials look like? What are the SKUs that you're actually selling? Anytime where you change terminology or language as you're describing your product, you want to make sure that you understand and plan for the impacts across the operational nature of your business. So whether that's legal, contracts, customer support, obviously, product, marketing, etc. So it does need to be shared across the organization. What we're talking about today, it is just that, an organization. We're not talking about packages yet. Well, I'll show you how it relates in a few minutes. But the product hierarchy really is aligned to your North Star. It is an outside-in view. It's not necessarily the engineer or the developer's code name that they've given to the next product that they're developing and that they're working on night and day, but it is an outside-in view. How are your customers and your buyers and your users understanding what your product is, what you call things, how you're labeling things? It is a flexible framework. We're not writing this in stone, so it should be able to grow with you. And if something isn't working, or if we need to reorganize it, you have the ability to do that. So you want to make sure that you remain flexible as you're defining your product framework or hierarchy. And emphasizing again, it establishes that common language. We're not talking about product brand names here, although there may become a time when that's necessary. And I'll show you again how that relates. But don't think about this in terms of these are all my product brands that I have to manage. I'm talking about one level deeper than that. I'm talking about the modules and the features that you have structured within your digital product, and again, within your services as well. So as we're talking about that, as we're talking about the common language too, working with clients across the board, I really don't care if you call it a product, a module, a feature, a solution, a platform, a use case, a scenario, whatever you call it, that's up to you. I just want to make sure that you all are calling it the same thing within your organization. So we know that if it's an add, edit, delete feature, we may not be marketing that or promoting that externally, but we know it exists. If it is a management type of module where you're configuring systems, you're configuring users and permissions and security, that may be a module within your product, but that again may not be necessarily promoted or marketed externally. So what are those things that you want to talk about? What are those things that you're selling? And then what are those things that the users need to know about? So all of those come into play when you are looking at your product hierarchy and how to structure a well-organized framework for that. So again, it's really important that you do have common terminology. And you would be surprised if you did an exercise and asked 5 people within your organization, what do you call this thing right here on the screen? You'll get 5 different answers. So make sure that you all are speaking the same language. Now we're going to talk, I'm going to give you a couple examples of different types of frameworks and hierarchies. And we're going to first take a look at Yum Brands. I think everybody is pretty familiar with Yum Brands. You may be more so when you were in your college days, more familiar with Yum Brands, but KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. And then you'll see as a very small sample of the menu from KFC, some of the different items that they have. So what do we mean by how these different hierarchies or these different frameworks really fit together? So at the top of this chart, you'll see the brand hierarchy. So that's the architecture of how all of these different brands fit together. In this case, it is a house of brands. In other cases, it may be a branded house. You may have completely different types of ways that you want to approach your brand hierarchy and your brand strategy, but this is one example. Below that, you'll see, as we're talking about today, this is maybe a silly example, but this is your product hierarchy. So it is a model of all of your offerings, modules, features, and it's organized. So you know if you're going to add iced tea to this, you know what bucket that's going to fit in, what box that's going to fit in. And then finally, only one approach to packaging is to turn that product hierarchy on its side and to identify, let's pick one of these, 2 of these, 3 of these, and package that together into meal number 1. So you'll see that this is one approach to packaging, but there are important ways that these different things fit together. So as you first create the product hierarchy, how does that impact your brand hierarchy? And how are you going to be promoting and marketing the products that you're offering as KFC in this example? And then how are you going to be selling it as you're packaging up these different bundles?
And Tina, I think that sometimes when people have a packaging pain point, that's when we usually need to rewind to the hierarchy. So they'll say like, oh, we need to get the right package to really increase our sales this year. And it's like, okay, well, what are the features? How are we organizing the product right now? And that's where we take the step back. So I think this packaging connection is a good one to bring up here and think about that connection for your products.
Right. That's a really good point, Kristin. And it's also not just about pricing. So sometimes you'll think about, I need to price this differently. Well, what are you pricing? What value are your users getting out of this or your buyers getting out of the product? So it's a great point that you need to still start back at, what are you offering? What are you selling? What are you marketing? Now let's talk about packaging and what makes the most sense to bundle together that's going to deliver the highest maximum value to your end customers. Great point. I also wanted to give you a digital example. I think everybody is probably familiar with this little company called Adobe and their different offerings that they have. So if you start to traverse down this hierarchy into the Creative Cloud down through Photoshop, you'll see that they have their different product brands, as you note here, but then as you start to go down deeper into Photoshop, whether it's Lightroom or other Photoshop products that they have available, then you get down into the modules such as illustration, and then the features under that. What types of cropping tools do they have, or editing, text editing tools, or color correction, etc. Those are the different features. Now they're not marketing those. We know they're there, but from a product marketing standpoint, it's not important to make that externally known, but you better internally know exactly how all of those things fit together. So you know when you're doing the next feature release, when you have something new, you know where it fits, what product brand it gets tied to, and how you're going to promote that externally. So we have one in the physical world, an example in the digital world. Now we want to talk a little bit about impact. It is very important that you are thoughtful about this process, but as a product marketer at heart, I do truly believe that this can impact your business, both inside and out. So what do we mean by that? So product hierarchy isn't the end all be all, but I do believe that it is a foundational building block to this. So across 4 different areas, the first being product marketing. Yes, it is a line item within product marketing, but it depends on your size organization. If you even have a distinct product marketing function, or your product hierarchy might be owned by the product team or your engineering team if you're a smaller organization or a startup. But product hierarchy is very foundational to the other product marketing work, such as positioning. So first you got to know how you're describing it, what it is, what does it do, what functions does it perform, so you know how to position it, how to call out those differentiators in market, how to describe it, and really pull on the strings of value that exist within your product hierarchy. It's important to understand the basics and the internal product itself before you can start to position it appropriately. Kristin just talked about packaging and the impact that it can have on that as one approach to turning it on its side and bundling different things together. Launches and releases, I mentioned that briefly. So if you have a new feature launch, where does it fit within your brand hierarchy, within your product hierarchy? How are you going to message that? How are you going to promote it? To what customers are you going to promote this new feature release? Are they anchored appropriately in the product so they know how important this new release is going to be to them? Obviously, it should have an impact on your digital presence. So on your site, as you're promoting and talking about your product, how is it organized? Can folks follow the breadcrumb trail on the website itself to get more details about the offerings that you have? Sales enablement, not only enabling the salespeople to talk more with more confidence and more authority about the product that you're offering, but also helping them understand the packaging and how that value is being delivered to the end customer. And finally, marketing enablement too. So making sure that you have the right definitions around the product features and the modules and what you're offering, what you're selling, so marketing can then promote it. I do believe this also has an impact on product, whether the product group owns product hierarchy and the framework, or if that exists in product marketing, it doesn't matter, but it does have an impact on how you're making decisions going forward, especially on the roadmap. So as you're looking at the new innovative features, does it fit? Where does it fit? Does it fit in a particular bucket or not? Do you need to create a new bucket to house these new offerings that you're going to be creating and developing? Terminology is very important as you're working with maybe multiple dev teams or multiple engineers. They may be talking about things, the same thing in very different ways. So again, the common language and terminology is important here. It also helps you to uncover the differentiators. So if there's a really technical feature that is typically buried, that only very special people know about, but in the product hierarchy, through that exercise, you're able to uncover that kind of value, and then you can make the decision on how you're going to promote that through marketing and sales efforts. But finding those differentiators, those golden nuggets within your product, if you don't know what box it's in, what label it has, what to call it even, then you need to take a step back and go through this type of an exercise. It also has impact on other internal teams. Talked about marketing and sales enablement, but customer success. So how are they supporting your customers? Where are they anchored? What products or modules are they using? What aren't they using? Are there opportunities for upsell and cross-sell? And then operations, as I mentioned earlier too, such as legal, even finance, all the ROI and metrics that you have tied to the various products or modules or product lines, if it is that broad and has that much complexity into it. So you have to understand that it does have an impact and a positive impact on these other internal teams. And then finally, and not the least for sure is the market. So customers are anchored. They understand what your product does. They understand where they can go next. So if you have a foot in the door with them, you're starting in a particular area of your product with a key few features or a starter package that you want them to get going with. How can they expand beyond that? How do they know that they can expand beyond that? If they don't have a good understanding of their starting point on the map, how do they know where they're going to go or the opportunities for them to go next? And prospects as well. I think it's always challenging for prospects to try to connect the dots themselves. So a clear product hierarchy or framework makes it very easy for them to do that. Understanding again what the product does, what features it has, what modules, what maybe even integrations that it has available to them. Analyst, also here too, don't rely on analysts to draw assumptions or to make claims on your behalf, but make sure it's very clear that you know what category, where you're playing and how the product fits into it. Investment, whether that's for VCs or PEs or acquisition. So as companies continue to grow, whether through acquisition or organic. So if the product is growing organically, having this good foundation in place is so very important. But also, if you are either the acquiring company or the acquisition, then it's helpful to have a strong foundation in place. So you know how to fit this Lego tower connected to this new one together, and understanding if there are overlapping features or overlapping functionality, how are you going to reconcile multiple product hierarchies or multiple frameworks in your organization? So it is necessary and important to have a strong foundation upon which you're going to impact all these different groups across both the internal organization and external. All right, putting it into practice.
Okay, so now we're going to move from our hierarchy 101 into really making this real. So how this part works. The first step is establishing your North Star. So this is different from positioning. I want to be clear about that. That's a whole different line of work. But the North Star is a really important piece of this process, and especially doing it before you get started. Because what you're doing is being very clear about what the product does and where it's headed. And why that's important is because if you're not aligned from the very beginning, it helps your team to know kind of what's in and what's out. So if I were to give kind of like an extreme example of misalignment, if your company and stakeholders decide that you want to be the premier company that delivers children's books, you are not going to be adding grocery delivery to your list of offerings. Okay, so having that kind of alignment from the beginning helps to have prioritization that is really straightforward. So that's what we mean by establishing the North Star. Then we move on to organizing offerings. So if we go back to Tina's cleaning out the garage example, I think this is where the rubber really hits the road with that example. So you're taking everything your product does and you're getting it out there. We'll, write it all on a whiteboard or get it all out in a note stock, like whatever it takes to get everything the product does out there is step one. And then you're going to sort it in a way that makes the most sense to your team and your market. So this can literally be done like on a table in a PowerPoint or a Excel spreadsheet. Like it does not need to be really fancy. Focus on getting it logical first, and all of that stuff can come later. So we see people categorize it lots of different ways. Honestly, it depends on your market, your industry, how people buy and sell it, what's going to make the most sense. And in this next step, 3, we actually have a couple of examples. So maybe some of these will help inspire you. But the goal is that everybody's on the same page and you're moving forward with how things are structured. And at that point, you get to grow the framework. So we have 3 examples here today. two are Innovatemap clients, and then a third Stripe is just an example in the market that we think is a good way of explaining how product hierarchy kind of comes to life in a website context on that one. So we'll jump into Blue Pillar first. So Blue Pillar had about 18 different features. Each was branded in its own way, and they really needed to simplify and make it easier. I'm not sure if any of you all have felt this simplification burden, but it's typically harder than adding complexity. We can all add to things and make them more complicated, but to put on the brakes and really simplify was their goal in doing this process. The thing that was kind of cool, and Tina alluded to this earlier, is that we discovered this context engine, and that's what the orange square is right in the middle. It was a valuable piece of their product that differentiated them from competitors, but we really wanted to call it out. So here, I think you can start to see how the creative begins to support what the product hierarchy discovered. And you can see it right here. This is their platform.
Yep, that's a great point too, Kristin, that I failed to mention earlier, is that as far as the visuals that are supporting this, if we wouldn't have gone through the product hierarchy exercise first, there's no way we could have defined this product visual to help them visually articulate the features and the functionality of the product, but then also, to Kristin's point, really calling out the differentiator. They're an IoT platform provider. It's very technical in nature, but this makes it pretty simple to understand. You see the data flowing in and out. You know that there's context engine as part of data services, but wow, that's important. I think I probably need to pay attention to that. And so they wanted to promote that valuable differentiator in context of their total platform. But again, the product hierarchy was foundational for us to be able to activate or to present it in such a visually compelling way. So another piece to that too.
Yeah, it had more meaning to it. Otherwise, visuals can just be, polish. Right. Okay, so next we're going to move to Greenlight Guru. And this particular product creates pre and post-market quality management software. And I think this is a pretty good example of product hierarchy organized by process. So it was most logical to their buyers and users and team to split it into pre-market and post-market. So that's what you see here. While we were talking a bit about how then it translated to creative and brand in the previous example, I think here we see a little bit how the positioning and messaging gets pulled in. So once you know what the features are and how you're going to organize them and how everything's going to fit together, then you can begin to talk about the benefits and the value props that support those. And so here you really see this is taken directly from their website, but you see the marriage of those components kind of coming alive.
Very good point. And you also note that they're calling audit management as an example. I mean, that's a huge feature, but in their terms, it is a feature to them. So that's great that they have clearly identified the terminology and the nomenclature around their product. This also helped them to speak to the different markets. So as they were moving into the post market, they had a set that was very specifically aimed towards them and have found great success in that. But being able to call out by process, to Kristin's point, was really how they differentiated their go-to-market strategies for those two as well.
Okay. And then finally, Stripe. This is accessible right from their website, but you can see here that they're organized a bit more by user persona and function. It's crystal clear what products fit where, and from the columns to the way they've designed the icons, I think it's a really nice example of how that product hierarchy is really coming alive in another software product.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing to call out here too, I think that's interesting, is how it relates to their product branding. Mm-hmm. They didn't come up with cutesy names for each of these different products. It is what it is. Connect, terminal, payments. Payments, yeah. That's not the fanciest word, but it tells you what it is. And I wholeheartedly believe in making that clear and easy to comprehend. You can come up with product brand names at the appropriate level within the hierarchy, and that's great, that's fine. But where appropriate, you don't have to. Where appropriate, at least give it the same name, align on the terminology. What are we calling this thing? And go forward with that. They don't all have to have fancy brand names tied to it, but it does have a brand identity tied to it as well. So that's up to you as to how far you want to go in marrying that to your product brand hierarchy as well.
And in fact, we usually advise not to add brand or that unique name until you need to. And you'll know when you need to, but less is really more as you're getting started, and then you can kind of work up to that point when the situation demands it.
Right. Going back to Blue Pillar's example, they called it a context engine, and giving it that name, speaking it out into the universe, is what was so important for them to name it, to claim it, to start to market and promote it. Okay. All right. So to wrap things up, just to leave you with a couple of final thoughts here. We really believe that it is foundational to your product marketing efforts, but keep this in mind as you go off to take a look at the fact of, do you need to have one? Do you need to clean out the garage? Do you need to relabel things and figure out what you're going to donate or what you're going to put back in a box on the right shelf in your garage? So you want to make sure that that's well organized. It's easy to understand both internally and externally. It's helping people, customers, prospects, even folks internally, to anchor themselves in the product understanding. So you're not leaving value on the table. So you have the opportunity to upsell and to expand their usage of the product if they know what they're using and know what they're not. Again, that's going to help them figure out their roadmap of use of the product too. One other side note here, it does not need to reflect your current product navigation. So don't let that stop you from doing this. If you choose to, over time, they can come more into alignment, but you do not have to simply reflect what is in your current nav bar for your digital product today. It also should be flexible, again, scalable, so it grows with you and with your product over time. But to Kristin's earlier point, keep your North Star in mind. Make sure that it is aligning to that. If you decide to change your North Star or to change your direction for your vision, that's fine. Make sure that your product is staying aligned to that. And again, operationalize. Internal impacts are understood and accounted for, and that common language is foundational and adopted across the organization. Put your swear jar out there if you need to make sure that people are using the new language and new terminology as you move forward. It's not rocket science, but it is very important exercise to go through. And sometimes things just kind of snap into focus for you, and you'll understand there may be different ways to approach it, different ways to group your features into modules or products or functionality. So start with a clean slate, figure out what you want to keep, figure out how to organize it, and move forward.
Thanks, Tina and Kristin. So one last call out. If you have any questions for the both of these two, send them in the Q&A section. But we did already have a few questions trickle in. So let's dive into these. First, how do teams get cross-organization buy-in when there is a need for an updated product hierarchy?
Mm-hmm. I think they should be part of the process. That's the first step on getting buy-in. So I think that there should be some product experts in the room. So whether that is in product or engineering, folks that understand the features to a level, not all the way down, but to a certain level, so they can be part of that process and have their voice heard. Also, sales should be involved. Also, product marketing and marketing should be involved in this. So you should have different stakeholders from across the organization be involved in the process to make sure that there is alignment across the board. And then it takes some time. So to learn a new language and to put it into practice on a daily basis definitely takes time. It takes repeatability, it takes encouragement, and sometimes reinforcement of that new way forward with the framework.
And as much as the titles and the teams and things like that often influence who's a stakeholder and who's not, I think with this in particular, it's who's feeling the pain. So getting buy-in, we're usually all a bit more bought in when it's going to make our daily lives better, more efficient. It's going to help hit whatever your goals are for this year. So I think thinking of it from that lens too can sometimes be helpful.
Great point.
Awesome. So the second one, and I think you touched on this, but anything you might want to add, which stakeholders should be involved in the development of a new product hierarchy? Again, you touched on this, but anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I like Kristin's addition there, that anybody that's feeling the pain, make sure you get their voices heard, and get all of their concerns out on the table and have them be part of it. I think that's really important. But again, people that know the product, understand it, are trying to talk about it. Those are all good folks to have in the room.
Yeah. Sometimes we see the stakeholders vary a little bit throughout the process. So it might be like the core business unit leaders in the initial kickoff and really setting some of the strategy, but then pulling in other team members who are really going to be behind getting this activated and making sure people are bought in, having them part of like review and refinement parts of this. Like usually the first version is not the one that people go with forever. Like there's a little bit of time to kind of try it on, see how it feels, see how customer success reacts to it versus say marketing or your engineering team. So I think having different stakeholders at different phases is something that's okay too, if your organization is at that size.
Awesome. So the next question is, if you start to see that your product hierarchy is becoming out of date, how long should you wait before you revamp it? Keeping in mind, changes can require input and effort from a lot of teams.
Yeah, it's not a quick task to go through for sure, but I do think that there comes a point in a lot of, especially scale-up organizations, where you've had product out there for several years, you've added a lot of new functionality and features to it. Take a step back, take a breath. It's not hard to do. It does take a little bit of effort though. But once you go through that effort the first time, then it should be easier to add on to it. So as things change, as things evolve, you're not going to have to start from scratch every time, but you will evolve it and revise it as you add new features and functionality to it. But that initial effort can feel a little bit daunting, but it really, there's like a weight lifted off of your shoulder that when everything is well organized and you can move forward with a clean framework. But it is definitely a wash, rinse, repeat sort of an exercise. Keep your eye on it. It's a living, breathing thing. It's not written in stone.
Yeah.
So last question here. Are there any events or milestones in particular that expose product hierarchy problems?
Time, I think, is one of them. It's hard for me to point to an exact milestone. I think so. Over time, you're going to continue to, it's going to get a little dusty in there, that you need to clean it up. One of the other things to think about is if you are going through an acquisition, that may be another good time to take a look at things, or if you're evaluating or positioning yourself for investment, making sure your house is in order is very helpful. So you don't just have clean books, but you've got a clean product too, and a well understood product. Those might be a couple of triggers for you to take a look at it.
I was also
new markets.
thinking a hiring spree. Like if you're going to hire a bunch of new sales or account team members, scaling something that's already broken is usually something where it's like, oh, let's do that now. We're about to make a lot of hires this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, in addition to that, I think going into new markets or potentially new types, new verticals, whatever it might be, whatever that means to you as an organization, but going into something new may also be another time to take a step back and reevaluate it.
Awesome.
The thing I keep thinking of is like when you want to get your house together before you have company over. So like any kind of visibility that your product's going to have in a larger scale, I think that's kind of like the thread throughout all of these. Like we don't want to amplify things that are already maybe kind of clunky or pulled together.
Right. New website is another example of that. If you're revamping that, how are you talking about the product there? Once they come in the front door, then what does it look like?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, great. So running through these questions, I think you you kind of inadvertently touched on each of those through the other answers. So thanks for submitting those. Thanks for your input, Tina and Kristin. Tina, if you wouldn't mind going to the last screen. So to the audience, thanks for carving time out today and for joining us. It's definitely our hope that you enjoyed the presentation and obviously received some level of value. So we're going to send some follow-up materials, and including a few things. First, it's going to have a recording of the presentation today. It's going to have additionally some contact information. If you'd like to keep this conversation going, you can feel free to reach out to anyone on the Innovatemap team, and all of that info will be included in there. And lastly, you're going to find an exciting opportunity to connect with some of our experts in more of a one-on-one office hours type format. So stay tuned for that as well. And then before we go, if you enjoyed the content today and you're seeking more resources, go ahead and join the Better Product community. It's a community of like-minded product professionals from all over where you can make connections, and you'll be able to engage with content like the presentation today. So with that, I'll let you all get back to your day. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you all again very soon.